I travel around the country collecting rocks and clays from specific locations, and I make pots that are made entirely from those materials that when they're fired, they're a sort of ceramic representation of the geology of those places. Hello, my name's Matthew Blakey and I live in a small village called Lode, which is just outside Cambridge in Cambridgeshire, and we are in my workshop where I make all my pots. So I started doing pottery in evening classes while I was doing a completely different thing and I just got absolutely obsessed with it. It just absolutely took over my thoughts completely. Eventually I went to art school and I was very fortunate to do a course that was really practical, where we learnt to not only throw and hand build and glaze and make pots, but develop our own glazes, build kilns, fire kilns, everything you needed to do to become a potter. I count myself lucky because there aren't many places around that people can learn those skills anymore. Most of the focus is on design. I think it's really important to be able to pass on that knowledge and inspire the next generation of potters. Pottery is quite hard compared to other art forms in that you have to have a technique behind you before you're able to make the thing that is in your mind. You have to understand the process. Some techniques, like wood firing, demand even more knowledge and development of skills. So I think it's really important for me and other potters of my generation to pass on our skills and our knowledge to inspire and help the next generation. My working process is quite specific and different than a lot of potters. Don't really use many materials that I buy from pottery shops. Instead, I travel around the country collecting rocks and clays from specific locations, and I make pots that are made entirely from those materials that I've collected. So when they're fired, they're a sort of ceramic representation of the geology of those places. We're really lucky living here in the UK. There's such an incredibly varied geology. So if you look at a geology map, there's a huge array of different rock types and different clays, all of which have their own character, certainly when they're in the raw state, but also if you use them in pottery. So the pieces that I make from different locations have very different characteristics. So you can really see the specific geology of those locations in the pot. So this pot, everything in it comes from Dartmoor in Devon. So the clay body is derived from the Dartmoor granite, and the glaze, or the different glazes on here, are all made from rocks that I collected from Dartmoor that have been ground up into a powder, blended together to form a glaze, and then it's been wood fired. So all of the colours in this pot are formed by impurities in the clays and the rocks that I collected from Dartmoor. That process itself was an original idea, and I thought that'd be interesting to see if that works. But then as I've spent time doing it, it's become something that I can't stop doing and for a couple of reasons really. Firstly, it's really connected me much more to the landscape of the UK than I felt previously. Often the places I go to collect materials are fairly isolated and hidden away and really stunningly beautiful, and it really gives me a connection with the land itself, which I love. But also the quality of the final pieces. I've been wood firing for decades now and trying to achieve certain effects in the wood kiln with commercial materials, which you know, I got nice results, but nothing as good, I don't think, as the results that I'm managing to achieve with these unrefined materials that I'm collecting myself. So the quality of the work is something that if I didn't do it anymore, I would really miss. These pots here are fresh out of the kiln, and they've had a an initial firing. It's called a biscuit firing. So they're still porous, but they're tough enough for me to handle, and they're ready to be glazed. So the next process is I'm going to apply one or more rock glazes to them, and then they'll be fired in my wood kiln to a much higher temperature at which the rocks will start melting. I'm often asked what my favourite glaze is or my favourite location, and I can't really answer because every place has its own particular characteristic. Sometimes I'm really surprised by the results I manage to get from them. I suppose if I was really pushed, I would have to say there was, I spent years and years trying to get a sort of milky blue colour, it's called a chun glaze, in my wood kiln with commercial materials, and not really managing to succeed. And then I went up to Scotland and I managed to find a rock that I just mixed with some wood ash, and it gave me the best chun glaze I've ever had in my life. So that was really, like for me, a sort of almost a miracle. The thing that I love about all my glazes though is there are so many different colours, ranging from blues, greens, blacks, rust colours, yellows, oranges, golds. All of the colours come from iron, so the only colorant that I'm using in my glazes is the colorants that are in the rocks, and that is predominantly iron. But luckily for me, iron produces lots and lots of different colours in ceramics. So I've made a number of kilns in my career, maybe over 10. The first one I made was maybe not the best, not that successful, but I've got better as I've understood more and more about what I want the kiln to do. My wood kilns, I have 2 wood kilns here, and they're relatively simple in design. They've got a fire in them where you're stoking wood and you're able to keep stoking wood, and then you need one or more areas where you can pile up pots in on shelves to fire them. So the one I'm currently using is actually quite a simple design. It's really just one chamber with a firebox at one end and then the chimney at the other. The design it's one of my own, but there are a number of kiln types historically that potters refer to adapt to try and make their own. So the kiln itself is built from bricks, very special bricks that can withstand a high temperature. It's probably about 2 cubic meters inside, I suppose, the packing space. And that means for me that I can get all of the pots behind me should fit nicely into the kiln. I can't pack the kiln too tightly because the firing itself, the flame from the wood and the ash is really important, and I need it to be able to pass through the pots, depositing ash on the pots and give a flavour of the firing to the pot. So I'm not just cramming as much in as possible. It's a fairly delicate process really.